Hi everyone and welcome to the Clarification Show. My name is Julia Tollin and today we will clarify some epic IT titles. Because let's face it, IT titles have gotten slightly out of hand. Some people call themselves gurus and wizards, and that's totally fine by me. You do you. But it can be slightly complicated for job applicants to know what their role will actually be about. Will I work with a cool spell today, or should I maybe spiritually guide someone? Since Vattenfall believes in clear titles and that they create a clear goal, they also believe that the interesting part about a job shouldn't be what you actually call it, but what you do and who you are. So they decided to help clarify some of these titles that have been circulating. Here to help me out, we have Kerstin Irenius, an IT manager at Vattenfall. And to give a more spiritual perspective to this, we have Parvin Bachu, philosopher and guru. Welcome, Kerstin and Parvin.
Thank you.
So we're actually going to start right away looking into these three titles that we have with us today. The first one is Epic Code Guru. What are your thoughts on this title?
Well, firstly, gurus never state their guruness. It is other people who state it for them, because it leaves a space, open space to attract followers. The moment you start to advertise as I'm a guru, then people ask, what sort of guru? And they deviate, they ask far too many questions. But it's got to come from people's own mind. This is the kind of person I want to follow. This is the guru I want to believe in. So they put all the efforts to put their total belief in this guru. And as some gurus, the more following, the greater following they get, they move into a territory of, as you would say, kind of epic guru. But in reality, what often these gurus become a kind of religious symbol. So that people start to offer prayers to them and they guide them. They have that command of certain different aspects of life. They use that very effectively to control people. And people look for that. People want to be commanded. People want to be led. But I think the moment we go into the epic aspect of it, then we are in the God territory. And that is, I don't think there ever has been any guru on the face of earth that has dared to touch the God territory. Because I think the moment any guru would touch the God territory, he would be killed, he would be destroyed. Because that is a holy grail that is so far away. Even the churches, the priests, the religious authorities, they have not even been there. And I certainly don't have any direct telephone number to the God thing. It's relevant, at the same time irrelevant.
Thank you for sharing, Parvin. So, Kerstin, when we hear about this, it would be really interesting to hear what would an epic code guru actually work with at Vattenfall?
Yeah. I think in Vattenfall, an epic code guru will translate into a full stack developer.
Right.
That would be someone that can develop the full stack from the back end to the middleware to the front end. And in addition to that, could also contribute in a substantial way to our code through local builds and deployments, such as using or developing and using CI/CD environments, for example. And maybe if you look at also the word guru, the full stack developer, a senior full stack developer would most likely also lead the other developers. So be a bit of guiding as well.
That's the purpose of guru. Right, exactly.
Both in the back-end development and in the front-end development.
I see. And I know that you have many opportunities for learning, growth and development within these roles at Vattenfall. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, I think that one thing that I personally find very motivating working in Vattenfall, that is that you can develop in all directions. With that, I mean you can really focus and deepen your knowledge in a specific area or in a specific field and become an expert in that subject, or you can be more of develop more as a generalist, have a big understanding about many things, but not so deep. Or you can do more development towards the managerial roles, such as a project manager, program manager, process manager perhaps, or as I am currently, a manager for a department. So that is one aspect of the development. Another aspect of development in Vattenfall and the possibilities, I think, is that we in Vattenfall IT, we work with and support all areas of Vattenfall. Meaning, even if you focus on being a full stack developer, for example, you can work with many different projects and business areas. So as a full stack developer, you could work with projects supporting, enabling the power production in the area of hydropower or wind power or whatever. But you could also work on more like together with the strategic department or the HR department or the markets, the trading department, for example. So
it seems like there's a lot of things to do for a full stack developer at Vattenfall.
Exactly. So that is another aspect of your sort of development in Vattenfall, I would say.
Parvin, would you say that a guru is someone that reached all the knowledge that you have talking about development, or do you have to keep learning all the time?
Well, I think gurus have to maintain this status where they have a perception of everything that goes around. That the way Kerstin was describing their guru is exactly what a guru ought to be doing, because he should never, ever waver from his position. Otherwise, he gets questioned. He probably won't have the same authority on his disciples. So I think Vattenfall is on the right track to creating their own little gurus.
So interesting. Thank you. Let's move on to the next title, because we have 3 titles today that we will go through. And the next one is Protector of Cyberspace. What would you translate this to, Kerstin?
I think a protector of cyberspace in Vattenfall could be translated to, for example, an IT security officer. I think when we talk about protection, we focus on security. And as I think all of us know, cybersecurity is a hot topic right now, hotter than ever, perhaps. And as an IT security officer, your responsibility is basically to protect the Vattenfall IT and OT landscape by understanding the security challenges coming with information technology as well as operation technology, and make sure that all our systems are compliant with the rules and regulations in the different countries Vattenfall operates in. In practice, it can be being part of development of new systems, making sure that they are designed in the best possible way from a security aspect, but of course still being usable. And in the existing landscape, always look for troubles and research how to mitigate threats and vulnerabilities once they are spotted.
And I would also straight away would like to have your perspective, Parvin. What do you think about when you, from your spiritual perspective, hear the title Protector of Cyberspace?
Well, it starts at home. You protect your own space, you protect your ideas, and excessive protection of ideas, of your space, or whatever situation you are in, it leads to a process of stagnation. In order to come out of stagnation, you have got to refer to other people. You have got to get inspiration for other people. And the protection of cyberspace is not the ultimate answer. There's something in between, where you have got to step out of the cyberspace, out of the protection hole, and come out and live life or ideas to be a part of a society, a part of a thinking, or a part of a new development. Otherwise, we'll be always stuck in one spot, never move forward.
And Kerstin, I know at Vattenfall, this IT security, what was it again? IT security... Officer, right. That's the clear title that we're looking for. It's also connected to a bigger purpose, right?
Yeah. So I think in Vattenfall in general, we have an extremely high focus on security. I tend to sometimes think about what would happen or what the society would look like without the supply of electricity, heat, and gas. And that is a quite scary thought to me. Imagine not having electricity in our hospitals, in our homes, in our industries. I mean, we would not even have drinking water without electricity. And that gives a quite good sort of perspective of why it's so important that we protect the IT and OT environments. What is perhaps an even more scary thought is to think about what would happen if someone with bad intentions would hack him or herself into our environment to be able to steer the assets, so the power plants, for example. And as we discussed earlier, you and I, we in Vattenfall, we operate both solar and wind power plants, but also hydropower plants, heat power plants, and nuclear power plants. So you can imagine that it is really important for us to make sure that no one that should not be operating these power plants are able to.
In other words, what you are trying to say is that you have to build a system which dealing with the sustainability of a society, because it is the basics. If the basics fall apart, everything falls apart.
Yeah.
We have made ourselves so dependent on energy sources. So Vattenfall is the key supplier of that energy.
One of the key suppliers. So Vattenfall is a part of the so-called European critical infrastructure. But of course, there are also other energy suppliers than Vattenfall in Europe.
Do you, Parvin, usually think about protecting like the energy and the space that you walk into when you're collaborating with people in a room or so on?
Well, I think everyone does it. I mean, when you walk into a space, it is your space is something very personal, and you always find the most suitable area where you find that particular protection. It depends on your own vulnerability. But if you are a much more positive person, you attack the space right on. If you are slightly vulnerable or uncertain of yourself, you find ways around it. One has to think about it. It's absolutely essential.
Great. We have a third title, so let's move into that as well. And this is on the spiritual way of looking at it. We call it Cloudiness Mastermind. Parvin, what do you think about when you hear this?
For me,
title?
Cloudiness Mastermind means it carries so much weight. It's heavy. It's not, you suddenly make a cloud. Cloud is supposed to be fluffy. Huh? And when you call Cloudiness Mastermind, it makes it heavy. It sort of becomes a burden to carry. But having said that, it's also essential to understand that in terms of a guru, he wants to create this heavy cloud and bring in people. The more people he brings into the cloud, the more heavy the cloud ought to become. But the spiritualism negates it in a different way. Spiritualism makes it lighter. But the most important thing in the cloudiness is the guru offers the disciples a safe haven. And in the safe haven, they find their existence. And in the safe haven, they also find themselves. And there's also a reason why a lot of the disciples leave this safe cloudiness environment. It's a fluid environment, I would say, although the gurus don't want to be fluid. They want to control the narrative. And I think in modern times that controlling of a narrative has become a very difficult issue. You can see even the churches are trying to control the narratives. It's become absolutely impossible for the churches because there are far too many free minds and people are walking into other territories of beliefs, other territories. This is where I talk about I've been thinking a lot about it, the cyberspace, the religious cyberspace. And I strongly believe, when you guys put me on, I strongly believe, I have convinced myself the last few days, the next religion is going to come off the gaming platform. And whether this religion is going to have a god or not, that is secondary. But the religion itself is going to come off the gaming platform. Gaming platforms are going to become so powerful because through gaming platform you're associating directly with it, although it's an artificial environment, but you are constantly negotiating with this environment. And the moment you get if you do it too long, you get into some kind of a spiritual relationship with your game or the new games or the environment. And that's where I sincerely believe is my profound reality, that the next religion is going to come off the gaming platform.
Really interesting. What would a cloudiness mastermind actually do at Vattenfall?
Yeah. In Vattenfall IT, we said when we talk about cloud, we talk about the environment, so the IT environment, the cloud. And I would say that this would most likely translate into a cloud architect.
Right.
And in Vattenfall, we have a so-called cloud first strategy. And that means that everything we can set up, build, and store in the cloud should be there. So as an cloud architect, you are responsible for govern, guide, and design, and sometimes enforce development in the cloud environment. You are also responsible to create standards and architectural principles to make sure that we populate the cloud in a good way. As an IT or cloud architect, you're also responsible for the growth of the central cloud platform. And why we have a central cloud platform in Vattenfall, that is so that we will be able to combine data from different sources in one place so that you can make use of it, so that we can take really the next step in becoming a data-driven organization, taking data-driven decisions, and also in order for us to invent new innovative solutions.
So if you were a cloud architect at Vattenfall, can you describe a project that you could be actually working on?
So as a cloud architect in Vattenfall, you can, just as a full stack developer, you can work in various different areas. But one thing that you can really, what this cloud environment really enables you is, for example, I can give you an example of a project that I worked with a couple of years ago with the aim to take more data-driven decisions in our operations and maintenance processes of our wind power plants. So by having a lot of data in the same place, using the big data concept, maybe you have heard of that, you can look back in historical data and you see patterns, and thereby, by understanding the patterns, you can also foresee the future. In the wind power plants, so on the wind turbines, we measure a lot of different components. We measure things in the blades, in the gearbox, in the fundament, in the cables, and we measure stuff like vibrations, temperatures, oil pressures, etc. So imagine, this is a very simplified example, but imagine that you know that with a certain amount of wind speed, you get a certain amount of electricity from the wind turbine.
Right.
But you also see, looking back at historical data, you see that now and then the power production goes down, even though the wind conditions are optimal. By also looking at this measurement data, you maybe see that every time a temperature in component X raises, this wind or production loss is there. So meaning when we have a temperature rise, we have an error. There we can see the correlation. So most likely it is because of the temperature rise that we have a lower power production. If you also add then the historical data of the maintenance performed, you will also be able to see what maintenance was performed in order to correct the error. And thereby, you can most likely, by monitor the temperatures, for example, then you can also plan for the maintenance to take place before the error occurs. And in that way, we will have more availability on wind farms, meaning more production. We will lower the cost in operations and maintenance activities. We will have more money to invest in fossil-free solutions and thereby power climate smarter living.
So the cloud architect will be like a part of this.
Exactly. The cloud architect would then enable this, so building or designing the environment where all this logic can take place.
So I think we established the differences between a guru and working in IT at Vattenfall. But Parvin, what would you say that you have in common?
It is the coding. The coding, which was originally was invented by a philosopher, Indian philosopher called Panini. And he was not a programmer, he was not a mathematician. He was an expert on language. He was an expert on Sanskrit. And he developed the grammatical coding, how to use a language, how the language should work, how it should interconnect, and that's where the clouding originated from. And then it's, of course, clouding at a later stage became a part of mathematics. And that's where the mathematics became the source for internet, software development, and that's the connection I draw to what Vattenfall is up to.
Kerstin, do you see that you have anything in common with the spiritual world, hearing Parvin speak about this?
Yeah, I think that just also as you said, but I think also that one of the things that we have in common, or our worlds have in common, is that, and also what Vattenfall has in common, is that we all try to sort of make a better place to live in. So we all look at the bigger purpose in our decision makings, in our everyday work or life. And that I think is very inspiring.
Right, because in a sense you do the materialistic aspect of life. A materialistic aspect of life can only function well if there is some sort of a spiritual aspect of life. That's where probably the gurus are an expert on tapping into the spiritual aspect of life.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's so interesting to get both these perspectives like this. Okay, so now we hopefully clarified that some of the titles are better left with what they actually mean, and that your purpose shouldn't be what you call yourself, but rather who you are and what you do. If you're interested in exploring an IT career at Vattenfall, don't hesitate and visit careers.vattenfall.com. Thank you so much for joining us today.